Juggling the pressures of her career and the weight of her family's secrets, Adela's loyalty is tested to the limit. When her past and present collide, she must decide to prioritize her job, protect her sister, or take a chance on her own healing. Adela on episode 1. Adela sat frozen in the meeting room of her office, Sumel Consulting. Her eyes fixed as the conversation with her boss, Hilda, escalated. The meeting room was usually cozy but now felt suffocating as the sunlight sipping through the blinds cast an eerie glow on Adela's face. Her slender fingers gripped her notepad, her knuckles white with tension.
You know how hard the pandemic hit us. The company needs to slash staff costs by 50%, which means we need to let one staff go from your department. So I'm leaving that decision to you.
Hilda's stern voice crackled, unaffected by Adela's concerns. Adela closed her eyes, exhaling a frustrated sigh. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders. She could feel the sweat beading on her forehead.
I understand, Hilda, but letting go of yet another staff will cripple our revenue growth.
Adela tried to maintain a steady voice despite the unrest brewing inside.
David and Genevieve are the only 2 members of my team I have left.
Give me one name by next Friday,
Hilda said dryly.
Otherwise, I'll assume you're the one who's chosen to leave.
Okay.
As Adela rose from her chair, Hilda's voice cut through again.
Am I getting Strata Constructions briefs today?
Today is Wednesday. I leave the office a little early on Wednesdays, remember?
Adela didn't think Hilda wanted her to go over why she had to leave the office 2 hours earlier on Wednesdays. They had already talked about it, but it seemed Hilda had forgotten.
Remind me, what's so special about Wednesdays?
Well, Hilda wove it off and turned to her computer.
Never mind, it's none of my business.
The meeting was over. Adela rose, gathering her belongings, and walked out, the weight of Hilda's ultimatum echoing in her mind like a ticking time bomb. Dr. Jacobs' office was small but well lit. A clutter-free desk and a bookshelf bore some significant texts and decorative plants, and the walls were soft and calm, just like his voice.
So, tell me, Princess, have you been sleeping lately?
The only sound in the room was the soft rustle of newspapers on her lap. Princess, a fragile 24-year-old, sat across from him, her eyes scanning the scattered pages with an intensity that opposed her delicate features. She was dressed in a pale blue gown. A hospital ID badge clipped to her chest bore her name in faded letters, a constant reminder of her lost identity.
Princess?
Actually, Doc, I haven't been able to sleep since I received the news because I have been very excited.
What news?
The Prince of Wales. He proposed to me last night and we're getting married at Buckingham Palace next week.
She kept searching until she finally produced a crumpled piece of paper from the pile of newspapers on her lap.
See, it's all here. The royal family has announced our engagement.
Princess's sparkling gaze met Dr. Jacob's deep but soothing eyes as she placed the paper in his hand. It was an old electricity bill, but his expression was unreadable.
Princess, would you like to tell me more about your sleep pattern in the last week?
Dr. Jacob asked, but Princess seemed more interested in discussing her dream wedding.
You must have heard about it, as it's been all over the news.
She paused, her head tilted.
Don't you believe me?
I have no cause to doubt you.
Don't worry, Doc. I'll sleep well when I marry my prince.
Her cracked lips parted in a light smile.
It's just that my father doesn't want the marriage to hold.
Your father?
Yes, we tried. Believe me, we have tried to convince him that I love the prince, but he is adamant. And at this point, I don't know what we are going to do, because the wedding is in a week.
Who are we?
Princess looked over her shoulders as though watching for someone who might be eavesdropping, and when she feels safe enough to share the details, she leans forward and said,
My sister, the nurses and the people in my head.
Just then, Adela burst into the room like she had been hurled in by a gust of wind.
Sorry, I'm late. I had an impromptu meeting with my boss and the traffic was horrible.
Dr. Jacobs glanced at his watch.
We still have 15 minutes.
Adela settled into the empty chair beside Princess and enveloped her sister in a warm hug, but Princess turned as stiff as a rock. It felt like she had suddenly lost her tongue. Dr. Jacobs had observed a similar behavior during their initial appointment, and now that it was happening again, he knew he had to watch closely.
I had hoped this joint session would help, as familiar faces often aid a patient's recovery.
Adela turned to Princess, her voice filled with concern.
Princess, it's me. How are you?
Princess returned to her newspapers. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned through the tattered sheets again for the next big thing. Adela turned to Dr. Jacobs.
Is she always this quiet?
Only when you are around.
Dr. Jacobs replied softly. Adela, Episode 2. Adela's office transformed into a hub of energy that Thursday morning, with Genevieve's vibrant presence animating the room. The 25-year-old's edgy style and infectious smile commanded attention, and so did the news she bore.
Are you serious?
Adela asked.
Yes, I have just forwarded the email to you.
How is that possible?
I met with the new head of human resources of Brandon Oil and Gas, and he is willing to revisit our contract. They need 20 more engineers for the gas pipeline construction and would like us to help recruit them.
Brandon Oil and Gas ended its contract with Sumel Consulting during the pandemic, and Genevieve's success in reviving that business relationship was remarkable. Genuinely impressed, a fleeting smile crossed Genevieve's face.
Perhaps we can present to their board by next week. They are eager to learn how they can expand our portfolio with their subsidiaries. So I'll finish up the slides and send them over shortly.
But that sounds great.
Okay then, I'll get to work.
Genevieve left, but to Adela's surprise returned holding a ceramic vase as she approached.
I bought this for my mom for Mother's Day.
Genevieve placed the vase on Adela's desk.
I thought of getting one for your mom, but then I remembered that she died. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Adela returned to signing documents until she realized that Genevieve was still in the room.
Anything else?
Please, Adela, if you have to pick someone, don't choose me.
Her voice trembled. Adela's pen dropped as she reclined in her chair.
I know about the downsizing. That's all everyone's talking about. But I want you to know that I really need this job. I always put in my best and promise that...
David called me last night sounding just as worried as you are. His wife is pregnant and there's a baby on the way and he's anxious too.
Genevieve's gaze fell. She hadn't expected to hear that.
Hilda wants me to choose someone, but don't worry about it. You and David have a great performance and I'll do my best to convince Hilda to keep both of you.
Genevieve's face lit up.
Thank you, boss. Thank you so much, Adela. You're the best.
As Genevieve walked out, Adela closed her eyes and took a deep breath. It sounded like she had a plan, but she didn't. A few more days, as the weight of Hilda's ultimatum lingered. It was Friday morning. Madame Dubois swept into Sumel Consulting, her presence electrifying the room. Gold bangles jingled on her wrists as she glided towards Genevieve's desk, exuding confidence and poise.
I'm here to see Adama Dimpa,
Madame Dubois announced, her voice commanding attention. Genevieve's eyes narrowed.
Good morning. You must be the lady who called yesterday. I'm sorry, but there's no one by that name in this office.
But this is the address my brother gave me.
Madame Dubois produced a photograph from her purse and placed it in front of Genevieve. Genevieve's gaze darted between the photo and Madame Dubois. Her brow furrowed suddenly as recognition sparked.
Adela!
C'est ridicule!
Madame Dubois gasped in French.
Young lady, I just flew in from Senegal. Would you be kind enough to inform Adela that her mother is here?
Take a seat. Ma, I'll let her know you're here.
As Adela and Madame Dubois entered Adela's flat that Friday evening, the tension between them was palpable. Adela wheeled Madame Dubois' medium-sized box to the center of the room.
The guest room is down the hall.
Adela's tone was detached as she dropped her keys on a nearby table.
There's hardly any food in my fridge. I would have been better prepared if I'd known you were coming. I'll probably need to go shopping tomorrow.
That's fine. I'm not hungry.
Madame Dubois wheeled her box away down the hallway to find the guest room. When she returned to the sitting room a few moments later, Adela was on her couch, so Madame Dubois sat beside her. The silence between the two women hung like a dark cloud, heavy with unresolved issues and unspoken accusations. Madame Dubois finally attempted to break the silence, maintaining a measured tone.
I called you several times, but you never responded nor replied to my messages.
Work has been hectic.
Why did you change your name to Adela?
Why did you abandon us to run off to Senegal?
Madame Dubois managed a weak smile.
I know I'm not your idea of a good mother, and it's likely too late to change that now, but you should have told me about Princess.
The doctor says it's not the end of the world.
But what happened? I thought Princess had left the psychiatric hospital. How come she was taken back there again?
Madame Dubois' voice was filled with concern. Princess was her baby, and it haunted her that she had to walk away from her two daughters when they were only 10 and 14 years old. She had never stopped questioning her decision to this day.
The nightmares returned some months ago. She stopped eating and started losing weight, so I had to take her back to the hospital, especially when she began hallucinating and destroying things.
But you should have informed me.
You left us, got remarried, and started a new life, so what was I supposed to do?
I need to see Princess. Please take me to her tomorrow.
That won't be possible.
Why?
I'd rather not discuss this now.
I came all the way, so why would you keep me from seeing her?
Princess's condition is finally improving. She doesn't say much, but at least she is calm. You show up out of the blues after so many years, and I don't want your presence to upset her.
The situation was quite delicate, and Adela didn't want to make things worse.
But I'm her mother. I need to see her.
Just then, Adela's phone rang. It was Hilda.
I need to pick this call.
Adela stepped away from the suffocating emotions and...
Hello?
How many more interviews for Brandon Oil and Gas?
2 more batches. I sent the briefs today.
I need 4 chartered accountants' briefs for Parker and Smith by Monday morning.
Adela glanced at the clock. It was 10:35 p.m.
Monday?
Do you have a problem with that? I could fire all 3 of you if it makes things easier.
It's just that I'll need to interview the candidates first, and we're also recruiting 30 client service officers for bridge communications, so that's why Monday seems a bit too close.
Make it happen. After all, you always tell me that you have a great team.
Okay, I'll get to work.
Adela returned to the couch and pulled her laptop out of her bag. She had to get back to work, even though she was still in her work clothes and hadn't yet rested from the day. She began working on a document for some minutes until she realized Madame Dubious was still holding on for a response.
We can visit Princess tomorrow. I started joint sessions with her on Wednesdays and Saturdays as recommended by her psychiatrist. Still, I have to warn you that she hardly recognizes anyone and barely speaks during those sessions.
I don't mind, I just want to see her.
I have to let you know so you are not disappointed when she does not recognize you.
Adela, Episode 3. Adela and Madame Dubois arrived at the psychiatric hospital about an hour before Dr. Jacob's scheduled session. Adela planned to have Madame Dubois meet Princess and settle her before her session. As the two ladies sat in the designated meeting area, several thoughts crossed their mind. They had been informed that the patients were having breakfast and that Princess would join them shortly, or not. The waiting area had a see-through glass facing the corridor for the patients' ward, and Adela sat facing this direction so she could sight Princess first. As soon as she spotted Princess, Adela rose, and she hastened towards her sister, attempting to caution her about their August visitor. Princess was dressed in her usual pale blue gown, but that morning her dark hair was held in a ponytail, unlike the last time Adela had laid eyes on her when it hung limp and lifeless. As soon as Princess opened the door, she was met by Adela's warm smile, but she didn't smile back. Suddenly, a spark of recognition dissolved into a grin as she screamed,
Mummy!
Princess sped past Adela into Madame Dubois' arms, who picked her up until Princess' legs hung in the air. Adela's eyes widened as the two shared a tight, emotional embrace.
Where have you been?
Princess asked, her voice trembling.
I missed you, Mummy. Where have you been?
I've missed you too, ma chérie, my baby.
Princess's excitement suddenly degenerated into a plea.
I want to leave this place. Please take me home. Take me home with you.
Fresh tears flowed down her cheeks. Madame Dubois couldn't help herself, nor the pain of seeing her daughter in such a state. Adela stood watching, eyes widened in shock, as Madame Dubois stroked Princess's hair, cupping her face, then pressing her lips against Princess's forehead. And with the second kiss, Princess's face transformed into a childlike grin.
Yesterday, Will Smith sent me love letters.
Madame Dubois exchanged a glance with Adela, who discreetly wiped away a tear.
Please come with him next time so we can all go to India.
Before Madame Dubois could respond, Princess' mood dropped and that she started to explain.
Mummy, I came to this place to look for a job, but they won't let me go. I want to go home.
Princess's voice was suddenly laced with desperation.
I want to go home. Please take me home.
Madame Dubois' embrace enveloped Princess once more as Adela approached them. It was almost time for Princess's session with Dr. Jacob, and she and Princess had to proceed to his office. Madame Dubois could wait there while they had the session.
Princess, it's almost time for your session.
Princess shouted.
Don't touch me.
Her sudden outburst startled both Adela and Madame Dubois.
Princess!
Adela's mouth hung open as Princess wore a sudden frown.
You asked me to wait for you, but you never came back. You left me alone in that house with him.
Princess's words tumbled out, full of anguish and accusation, and it became clear to everyone what she meant by that. Princess continued to sob.
You left me with him,
she cried, her body shaking with the weight of trauma.
I'm sorry, Princess. I'm so sorry.
Adela's tears flowed freely. She had struggled to forgive herself for what happened years ago, and it pained her deeply that Princess would bring it up in such a manner. The room seemed to shrink in that moment, leaving the three women suspended in a sea of pain and regret. Adela started the car and hit the road as soon as Madame Dubois stepped in. There were so many words left unsaid and so many raw emotions she could barely endure, but she kept her gaze fixed on the road ahead as she drove.
You don't have to blame yourself alone. I blame myself too.
He was her father.
He was a beast. What kind of father would rape his daughter for years?
Madame Dubois paused, collecting her thoughts.
When he threw my things out, I tried to take you and Princess, but he refused. I pleaded, but he refused and insisted that I left without you both, and there was nothing I could do as he threatened to kill me if I went to the police.
She paused and tried to gather her words.
I had no idea he would start molesting his own daughter.
Adela's expression remained indifferent, her eyes still on the road.
What kind of a mother would desert her children? I never wanted to leave you both, but I'm here now to make amends, and I want you to please forgive me.
Forgiveness was the last thing on Adela's mind. All she could think of was Princess and how she blamed her for everything that had happened. Adela had practically done everything within her power to be there for her sister, only to realize that Princess blamed her for their father's shortcomings.
We need to remove Princess from that hospital and find an alternative solution.
Madame Dubois announced as Adela turned to her.
An alternative solution like what?
Your uncle knows a herbalist in the village who can provide proper medication.
Princess is receiving good care. Dr. Jacobs is one of the best hands.
But all the doctors do during those sessions is talk. You can't treat madness with talking. She's been there 6 months, and instead of improving, she's hallucinating about American movie stars and visiting India.
Adela's patience was thinning out, and it felt like Madame Dubois was standing on her last nerve.
Princess has mania. That's why she's talkative, grandiose, and sometimes irritable.
Adama, your problem is that you know too much English. You love speaking big grammar all the time. Why would you prefer a solution that isn't effective when we have alternative traditional solutions? That was why you changed your name, isn't it?
My name is Adela.
Your name is Adama. We gave you that name with pride in our hearts. Your name is Adama.
That was it. Adela had had enough of this woman.
My name is Adela, and you abandoned us for years and I had to become Princess's mother. How dare you?
Get over yourself, young lady. You weren't in my marriage. You don't know how many times that man beat me up and the decisions I had to make.
I don't care. The fact is that you walked away. I have been responsible for Princess for as long as I can remember. I had to grow up fast and nearly lost my childhood because I had to be both her mother and my own. So I have the right to change my name from Adama to whatever I choose.
Congratulations. But if you were so good at protecting Princess, how did you not know that your father had been sexually abusing her for 7 years after I left?
So now you are blaming me for what he did to her?
Adela could not believe her ears.
I'm amazed at how consumed you are by bitterness. What really is troubling you? Is it because I left you when you were young, or because Princess recognized me today?
Diela shook her head in disbelief.
I'm still your mother, whether you accept it or not, and it doesn't matter if you tell people that I am dead or alive.
At that point, Adela's phone started to ring, Hilda's name flashing on the screen. But Adela kept driving, her chest heaving with each passing moment.
You should pick that. It might be the hospital.
Adela replied calmly,
It's not.
It was the next Tuesday morning. Adela had barely had any time to sleep. Her thoughts were all over the place. Hilda expected a name of someone to lay off from the company by Friday. That, including the guilt from the past and the recent fight with her mother, lingered, and she found herself in the hospital parking lot that evening to meet with Dr. Jacob personally. Inside Dr. Jacobs' office, Adela sat across from him as Dr. Jacobs' warm eyes settled on her.
But you told me your mother was dead.
She was dead to us until she resurfaced last week.
That's interesting. So, what have you decided?
I'll never let her take Princess away from here.
Well, that's fine. Because we also would not let anyone take her from here without your consent, so you don't need to worry.
His words seemed reassuring, yet Adela's emotions surged as she leaned forward, burying her face in her hands, and burst into tears. The outburst caught her off guard.
I'm sorry,
Adela said.
This isn't even a therapy session. It's just that I'm just feeling very overwhelmed.
I understand. Sometimes family members need support too, as it's not easy to witness your loved one go through psychiatric challenges.
Diela's sobs continued, her body shaking with the weight of unspoken fears, and Dr. Jacobs' voice remained calm and reassuring.
Your sister is in good hands. But if you feel like the last couple of weeks have been too much on you, then you can consider taking time off.
I need to work.
But you obviously can't function at work like this.
What hurts me the most is that Princess hasn't spoken to me in so long, but you should have seen how she warmed up to my mother instantly last Saturday. Adela's voice cracked into sobs again as she recalled Princess's harsh
words.
When she first hinted at the rape, I didn't take her seriously. I didn't do anything, and that's why it continued. It's my fault, and I wish I had done something.
Adela, you were 14 at the time. You were young and did the best you could. Remember, you were the one who eventually reported your father to the police.
It makes me sad that I keep letting people down. My colleagues are about to lose their jobs, and I can't even protect them.
Why don't we take it one day at a time? You can only do as much as you can, and you sound like the best boss, sister, and daughter anyone could wish for.
Dr. Jacobs leaned forward.
Family dynamics are complex. I'm thinking that your mother's return could help Princess heal, and your relationship with her can improve. I see your mother's presence as a blessing. Princess needs her just as much as she needs you.
Adela's expression remained skeptical, but a glimmer of hope flickered. It was Friday morning. A week had passed since their last conversation, and Adela sat across the table from Hilda. She had just presented the name of the staff who was leaving the team, and now she waited for Hilda to digest the information.
Believe me, I had no idea you were going through all this.
We're all dealing with something. I didn't want to burden you with mine.
But you don't have to leave us. I could talk to the board.
I thought you said that wasn't possible.
I can persuade them. You, Genevieve, and David can keep your jobs.
I appreciate it, Hilda, but I've made up my mind and there's no going back.
Adela's gratitude was genuine, but her resolve remained. The work environment was toxic thanks to Hilda, and there were so many things Adela knew she had to fix, including taking time off to focus on herself and her family. Later that day, inside Dr. Jacobs' office, Princess sat opposite him. When the door swung open, Madame Dubois and Adela stepped in. Madame Dubois held the vase Genevieve gave to Adela, and it appears Adela had asked her to stay to help with Princess's recovery. Princess rushes into her mother's arms. The familiar affection washed over them, but this time, Adela joined, enveloping them both in a warm embrace. Dr. Jacobs welcomes them all to the joint session. He turns to Princess.
You seem very happy, Princess.
Yes, Doctor, I'm happy to see my mother.
Princess had turned to Adela, a sense of closure and newfound hope filling the space between them.
And my sister.
The end. This story was brought to you by Tconcepts. Kindly follow for more contents.